we have the scene where Standard gets assaulted and what happens just afterwards. At first, we would like to talk about framing and composition. Afterwards, we'll talk about some frame grabs, and in the end, we'll talk about a sequence that we have chosen. Framing and composition is very important to like different movies because it supports the plot of the movie, and like it also helps to characterize the different characters in the movie. Framing and composition also highlights the feelings of the characters in the movie, and it helps to show different relations between the characters and highlights the most important relations. Framing can also show some kind of hierarchy, and composition also helps with that, and like shows which people are important in the movie and which is not, and who is not.
Frame grab 1. Now at this point in the movie, Driver has already been introduced to Standard, but he isn't yet familiar with his background. He's very invested in the family, and he cares for Irene and Benicio especially. Now, as Driver drives through the parking cellar, his interest in the men is clearly shown in the way in which the camera is fixated on the men and pans along with them, just as Driver's line of sight pans along with the men. This makes the men look even more suspicious and foreshadows that something bad has happened or is about to happen. Now, the lighting also plays a major role in the interpretation of this frame grab, as the fact that the driver is sitting in his car alone in the dark quite literally symbolizes Driver's isolation and his unknowingness of the events that are going on around him.
In this frame grab, one side of Driver's face is lit up while the other side is still dark, as opposed to the previous frame grab where Driver was entirely in the dark. This tells us that Driver is beginning to get an understanding of the events that are going on around him, but he isn't in complete understanding yet. We also watch as the camera zooms in on Driver's face, creating intensity and shifting focus towards Driver's emotions and thought process. This is all while the horizontal lines in the back and middle ground create a feeling of standstill.
Okay, frame grab 3. At this point in the movie, Driver has more or less substituted Standard in the role as Benicio's father, as Standard has proven again that he is not in a position to take fatherly responsibility for Benicio. Of course, Standard is not content with this substitution, and in this particular frame grab, the composition has a whole lot to say about that. In the foreground, we see Driver, in focus, in power, and sitting right beside Benicio as a father should be. In the background, we see the room to the toilet in which Standard is aching. We also see the illuminated lamp to remind us, the viewers, that Standard is still in the image, but he is hidden away from sight, just as he is hidden in the role as a father. And in the middle, we have Benicio, sitting innocently, staring blankly into the room. He doesn't know of this fathership conflict between Driver and Standard, and yet the lighting which is casted upon him tells us that he is a major point of interest, the trophy in question. From this standpoint, and with the immense amount of information we can get from this frame grab, it is clearly foreshadowed who will win the fathership conflict, and thereby win Benicio, since putting Standard out of the image is quite literally as easy as flicking the light switch of the lamp.
Then we have chosen a sequence this sequence. Yes, in this sequence we see a conversation between Driver and Benicio. And again we have an example of this father and son relationship that they have. The conversation between Driver and Standard that we have seen just right before this scene, Driver talks to Standard very robotic and cold, but he seems very warm and protective when he talks to Benicio, just like he was his father. He asks Benicio to keep the bullet for him while smiling at him, and prior he has asked Benicio if he wants something to drink. He cares for Benicio and is very explicit in his very own way. You can also see it on the angles, because you see the angles from Driver's and Benicio's perspective, where Benicio looks up to Driver in a slightly lower angle, and Driver is watching over Benicio in a slightly higher angle, as a son would look up to his father, and as a father would watch over his son. The lighting in the scene, we can see that the lighting shines upon Benicio while Driver is in the dark. This could mean that Benicio still has his innocence, the innocence of a child, while Driver is about to do something very dark to protect the family. In the end of the scene, we see a shot where Driver is holding the bullet very close to the camera. In the foreground, we have Driver's hand where the bullet, with the bullet, and in the middle ground we see Benicio. This shot highlights the importance of the bullet, and also that the meaning of the bullet is very central. The meaning of the bullet starts by being a threat to the family because it has been given to Benicio, but it ends up being a symbol of Driver taking this task upon him, which also is part of the turning point, that he takes, or officially takes, the task of protecting the family upon him.